quick update for everyone. We are live in 15 seconds. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Bilal, and I'm very happy and honored to be moderating today's session. We have a very exciting session, a part of the Indigenous Peoples Week. Today's session is the chef storytelling. Before we get started in today's session, I just want to give a quick update that today's session is a part of a full week of very exciting sessions about the Indigenous peoples, about their stories, their knowledge, and it's a part of the 5th Global Meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum here at IFAD with the theme of the value of Indigenous food systems, the resilience in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with that out of the way, today's session is a very exciting session for me specifically because I love food, I love cooking, and we have an amazing lineup of fantastic chefs, we have experts on the panel as well who will be sharing with us great stories and knowledge. Let me tell you a little bit more about today's session. Today's session is titled Chef Storytelling, the Value of Indigenous and Afro-descendant Food Systems. What should we expect from today's session? So today's session has a main goal to share narratives of Indigenous and Afro-descendant cultural food practices, highlighting the value of Indigenous knowledge. It's a friendly conversation linking the Indigenous Peoples Forum's theme, the value of Indigenous food systems, the resilience specifically in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, with food, flavors, and as we said, most importantly, resilience. Those will be the connecting dots that will contribute to refine the importance of the Indigenous people's food systems in the times of COVID-19 and beyond, not just during these times. So with that out of the way, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the lineup or of the panel that we have today. Today we have Chef Bella Gill. I'm going to tell you more about her. I'm sure you know her. We have Chef Dane Sadler. We have Dr. Sonia Peter. We have Chef Mariah Gladstone. And we have Chef Sean Sherman. With my honor, I would love to welcome Chef Bella Gill. Let me tell you a little bit more about her. I've been following her for quite some time. She's a chef, she's a TV personality, and a social media sensation. She advocates conscious and healthy eating. Bella is also an author of award-winning books that bring recipes, information on ingredients, and lifestyle tips that benefit the health and the body and the environment all at the same time. So, Chef Bella, thank you so much for joining us today. Please, the mic is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Bilal, for this amazing introduction. And I'd like to thank IFAD for the invitation. And I have to say that I got really excited when I got the email with the invitation. And I said, oh my God, I have so many things to talk about regarding Indigenous people and Afro-descendant, because Brazil is that we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that mixture. And then I got, okay, you only have 5 minutes to talk, so I'll try my best. And I'd like to start with a story about my first time in the Amazon basin. So Bilal, if I pass like the 5 minutes, please cut me. No problem at all. I'll try my best. And okay. So when I got there, like my first trip to the Amazon was, I believe, in 2014. And I went with a friend, an anthropologist friend, and he said, you see the forest, and you really believe that it's all like, it's virgin, you know? And I said, yeah. And he said, not really, because scientists had discovered that from all these 9 or 10,000 years that the indigenous population had been in the Amazon, that almost all of the forest has been managed. And they found a type of very dark and very fertile, artificial, anthropogenic kind of soil that we know today as the black soil of the Indian, or Indian's black earth, and it's very, very rich. It's like the best soil you can have. And this shows that the indigenous population was present in the Amazon forest for a very long time and in a very large territory. They used to move from place to place and I mean, planting, producing food, and then going to another place and then returning to the same place and producing food again. And this made the soil very, very rich. And this is a amazing way to produce food, and that's the opposite way of what the Europeans did when they came here to Brazil, introducing monocrops of sugarcane, cotton, and etc. And we know that that's like really terrible for the soil. So what I want to say, what I want to conclude from that is that the agroforestry system that we know today, it's actually the indigenous way of producing food. It's their agricultural practice that we systemized, we acknowledge that, and we systemized for us Western-minded people really understand. And that's amazing because I believe that that's a gift that the indigenous people gave to us, because agroforestry, it's an amazing way to produce food that not only produces food, nutritious food and healthy food for us and for the planet and for the soil, but it can sequester a lot of carbon. And I believe that we know that agriculture today, it's responsible for about 35% of greenhouse gases emission. That's with human activity. That's a lot, that's huge. And I believe that agriculture, it's our problem today, but also our solution, because if we decide to produce food the best way, the right way with agroforestry, for example, we can not only reduce our emissions, but also revert global warming. And I believe that that's the best, that's the like amazing gift that indigenous people gave to us. And I believe that we cannot let it go. Like, we have to take it and do something about it, and change the way we produce food to feed the world.
Thank you so much, Bella. I never thought about it the way you just presented it. Going back to producing food in an old, I don't want to say old way, but in a traditional way, or maybe in a more considerate way, would definitely have a positive impact on the world, because everything is connected, and the way we produce food, obviously, if we produce it in an unhealthy way or in an inconsiderate way to the planet, is going to have an effect on not only necessarily on food, but it's going to have consequences on everything else. So thank you so much for that. I do have a follow-up question. You said that the first time you visited the Amazons with a friend, and you had that conversation. I guess my question would maybe a bit more of a personal question, and then maybe we can take it into link it to our topic for today, which is what, obviously you are a part of the culture there, you are in Brazil, but what made you particularly want to go and visit the Amazons? Was that before wanting to become a chef, or did that trip made you want to become a chef?
No, it was actually because I was a chef, and I had another friend, a chef here from Brazil, Alex Atala. Maybe you know him too. And he works a lot with indigenous communities and populations to kind of recover their traditional culinary traditions. And he invited me to go to the Amazon, actually to, how can I say, they were doing a pepper facility in some of the communities, and I went there to learn more about it, and also to kind of spread the word that they were doing that. So actually it was because of my profession that I I went to the Amazon, not the other way
Not the
around.
other way around. Great, thank you so much. And I have two follow-up questions. Number one, what would you say? I mean, you've studied this for quite some time. You've witnessed traditional ways of doing things, of agriculture. What would you say? I don't want to say the word what we're doing wrong, but if you wanted to use one way of doing things that you saw that is very effective and would solve a problem at the moment, what would you think the indigenous people did in a very effective way that we could take advantage of it now?
That Well, I have two things, but first I would say that like the way they produce food, it's very harmonious with nature, you know. And so some people got that, like saw that and systemized it, and we call now agroforestry. I don't know if you've seen, but it's actually producing food the way nature does, just accelerating it, you know. So we plant, you know, the leaves with fruit trees, with like it's syntropic, you know, many
Right.
many things, as the way the forest is, you know. We just accelerate that, and that, as I said, it's really good for the earth because we can really sequester carbon. It's not only like a good way that doesn't emit any, you know, emissions, but actually reduces our other types of emissions that we make. So I believe that if we understand this and if we make this our way to produce food, you know, alternating or substituting the monocrops that we have, like here in Brazil, it's terrible because, you know, like 80% of the deforestation in the Amazon occurs because of animal agriculture. You know,
Right.
they burn it and produce soy to feed the cattle or put the cattle there. So it's just terrible. We are becoming, you know, the forest is becoming a really big monocrop of soy, corn, and or sugar cane or
Right.
palm oil. It's terrible. So I believe that for me, it's the
Right.
most amazing thing we can do.
Thank you so much, Chef Bella. That's fantastic. Oh, hello. Hi.
That's my son. Sorry.
Thank you so much. No, hi. So thank you so much for that. And I've learned. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Now we're gonna move on and go to Dr. Sonia Peter. Dr. Sonia Peter, she's the director of the Biocultural Education and Research Program in Barbados and the founding director of Heritage Teas in Barbados. So without any further ado, it's my honor to go ahead and introduce Dr. Sonia. The mic is yours. Let me see if Dr. Sonia is still on. It seems that Dr. Sonia unfortunately disconnected, probably a Oh, she's back again. So I'll go ahead and one more time say thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sonia.
Thank you, and let me apologize for that short break.
It's okay, please. The mic is yours.
Um, it's interesting that I'm following Chef Bella, who I think is from Brazil, because I have a grandparent who was born in Brazil. And I cherish that. I haven't been able to follow up in great detail, but I do personally do embrace Brazilian culture, and very so. I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this presentation today. I've begun to follow the work of the Indigenous Peoples Forum. I've seen some of the recordings from previous meetings, and I must say that I do embrace all that's being done to demonstrate that Indigenous peoples do have very important contributions to make as we look at all of the systems we have to model so that we can be sustainable. So I am from Barbados. I established the biocultural
Okay, it seems that Dr. Sonia got disconnected. Dr. Sonia, um, we will have someone try to assist Dr. Sonia with her technical difficulties. I would like to take advantage and welcome Chef Dane, who will be next. Let me tell you a little bit more about Chef Dane. He's a national award-winning chef with over 15 years of experience. Dan has taken personal Dane, excuse me, have taken personal interest in health and wellness, offering not only the tastiest but also the healthiest in cuisine. He has extended his culinary reach and partnered with local farmers, both traditional and organic, to access and offer fresh ingredients. He also works with many foundations promoting beneficial food choices and their impact on the health. So again, I would like to welcome Chef Dane and thank you so much for joining us today. The mic is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good night. Thank you for having me. Dr. Sonia and I were working together on the presentation. She was going to give you a brief background and history behind the breadfruit, which is the ingredient of choice we are highlighting today. But let me just give you a brief background. Breadfruit came over to Barbados and the West Indies during slavery and has become a staple in our diet. Many regions in the Caribbean grow breadfruit. And here is a picture of one. I don't know if you'll get it in Italy, but the breadfruit has become a staple in the communities. In previous years, you'd find persons, fishermen, coming off the beach, and then persons on the beach roasting breadfruit, as you see there in the picture, roasting breadfruit on the beach and eating it fresh with fresh fish. And in the communities, you'll see them having the breadfruit in a drum, and sometimes just cutting it, having it with butter and ketchup. And breadfruit is readily available all over the island. You've passed thousands of trees if you drive through Barbados, so it has become a staple. And especially during this pandemic time, it has supported a lot of communities and families who are unable to go into supermarkets or are lacking funds to buy traditional means of food. And Barbados imports about 80% of the food we consume here. So there's been a big push to really get back to the core of our eating and eat local, push more local ingredients. So you see breadfruit, sweet potatoes, a lot of grown provisions being promoted. And the funny thing, because breadfruit has become such a big part of the community, Barbados is known as the culinary capital of the Caribbean. So breadfruit has made its way into restaurants here now and is become a fine dining dish. So you'd find if you go in a restaurant, you see breadfruit as a side dish, and it has become such an integral part of the culture and population now. There are companies popping up creating breadfruit bowls, so which is basically a roasted breadfruit here, stuffed with either pulled pork or fish or curried lentils or various meats. But it has become, if you go to an event, you'll get a breadfruit bowl and it's well presented. So it's come out of the community now and gone mainstream into the restaurants. And we even export bread. Years ago, we started exporting breadfruit to Canada because there was a big market there for it. So breadfruit has evolved from just a dish you'd have at home with friends and family to a dish you serve to clients, tourists, and it has become a part of Barbadian culture and on the international scene is synonymous with Barbados right now. So these are just some different examples of the breadfruit being presented. If you go to an event or one of our big street parties, you get a breadfruit bowl and you enjoy it. You can share. It's a big dish, so it's very filling. But in restaurants, they scale it down, make it more appetizing and well presented. But it just goes to show the evolution of food, how it's gone from what we used to call a poor man's dish to now being marketed as a culinary delight here in Barbados. I'm not sure if Dr. Sonia is back to elaborate on the history of breadfruit.
Yes, absolutely. I just realized that Dr. Sonia is indeed back. So
Okay.
we're gonna give her, thank you so much, Chef Dane, for that. I do have a lot of questions about the breadfruit, but I'll give the mic to Dr. Sonia to give some notes and some background.
Thank you.
Please let me apologize. My connection has become very unstable. So I hope I can share a bit of the story. We know that breadfruit came to the islands from Tahiti. It was brought over by William Bligh in the, oh great, I thought he was gone again. Yeah, so Barbados, you can see where we are in the Caribbean archipelago, and we can see the distance between us and mainland Africa, where our main descendants came from. And I was saying that, or the next slide, since I get an opportunity to tell the full story, this is our city, Bridgetown, which was established in 1628 by the then colonialists. It is centered around our seaport, and this beautiful image here is really reflective of the people and the culture of Barbados and also across the Caribbean. Next slide will show us how our history is steeped into the past Atlantic slave trade, where unfortunately human cargo was transported from Africa to the Caribbean and elsewhere. And Barbados was the first port for many of the ships coming across. And there is a book written by Ligon, who describes the first view of Barbados, where he talks about how lush and beautiful the plant life was. And so breadfruit was transported indeed to provide a staple for the enslaved Africans who initially did not embrace it according to the history. But as we see now, if we go around our landscapes, next slide, breadfruit is now embraced fully. They grow very well in our soil, and we'll see them actually embedded within our culture, because we even have them as a place of gathering. There's nothing like having a cup of tea under your breadfruit tree, or setting up your chairs just to sit and be shaded by the tree. They offer up their fruit, hanging for eager hands to capture them and demonstrate the versatility. As Chef Dane was speaking about, we take those fruits, and on the next slide is just an indication of the beauty of the tree. And the fruits can be boiled, they can be roasted, they can be pickled, very versatile, as Chef Dane was illustrating. But we've also embraced all parts of the tree. The wood has been used, though it's a soft wood. Uses have been found for it. In some instances, vessels, culinary vessels. And the tree provides medicinal value as well in those beautiful leaves we see there. We use the leaves in the dried form. This is one of the dried leaves. And we can use the green or the yellow leaf. And we make a very aromatic blend. And here I have some to demonstrate the beauty of that tea. As we can see, it is used for the treatment of diabetes and hypertension. And typically we would have a cup of that tea in a traditional metal cup. So the breadfruit has become signature. I don't know if I'm still on, has become signature. Yes. To our culture, yes. Both for our food systems and also for traditional medicine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonia. And it's quite fascinating when you were, I mean, obviously, this is the first time I personally see a breadfruit. And I was intrigued when Chef Dane was talking about it, the way it looked, and then there was a picture of him roasting it on
Yes,
the beach. And then you mentioned that it could be boiled, and then
that's right.
the leaves can be used to make trees and aromatic blends, and
That's
then
right.
the wood itself can be used and
That's
to make.
correct.
That's fascinating because you're using one resource, and let's call it that way, and then you're trying to get the most out of it. And
Yeah,
I think this is and I do want to say something at the end that I prepared, which is, but I'll go ahead and mention it now because I think now time is appropriate. We take food for granted
yeah,
because it became so easy to go down the grocery store and simply buy anything we want.
that's correct.
But at the end of the day, people at some point through the evolution of knowledge and
Yeah,
the ancestors really didn't have that privilege of um,
yeah,
purchasing things from a store, so they had to get the most out of it, that being medicine,
yeah,
that being a drink, that being taking advantage of the shade,
that's
using
right.
the wood. So this
That's right.
resourcefulness is quite fascinating, and I think during the times that we're going through, and even not necessarily, we don't have to go through a pandemic to realize that food is not to be taken for granted. I think being resourceful and showing respect to nature by taking the most that it can offer you, by accepting it, and not using it as a or not treating it as a disposable item in nature. I think this is something that should be promoted, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. And on that note, I just want to mention that we wouldn't be able to do this. I want to thank Slow Food as well as the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus for making this happen. We've been partners, and they were able to help us. They helped us to be able to do this. So we appreciate you, appreciate your work. And again, Dr. Sonia, Chef Dane, thank you so much for sharing that wonderful knowledge with us. I want to go ahead and move on to Chef Mariah Gladstone. Chef Mariah grew up in Northwest Montana. She graduated from Columbia University with a degree in environmental engineering. She returned home where she developed Indige Kitchen. Mariah has been recognized as a champion of change through the Center of Native American Youth. Um, Chef Mariah, I've been following her in DigiKitchen. She makes wonderful recipes. I tried to replicate some myself. Some failed because I'm not as good. Some were really fantastic. So I want to go ahead and say, Chef Mariah, the mic is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It is good to be here digitally with everyone. As you can see, the sun is just barely coming up where I am in Northwest Montana on the Blackfeet Nation. I'll start by introducing myself very briefly in my language. Oki nistunatanaku omachkes tawakaki nopak toto sitikiti tapiksakum. My name is Mariah Gladstone, and I am from this beautiful land, Blackfeet country. We are situated right next to the Rocky Mountains. So we are about 10 miles south of the Canadian border. It is about 20 below 0 Fahrenheit here, which is about 28 below 0 Celsius outside right now. We are situated in a very unique ecosystem where Blackfeet have access to both high mountain peaks, some over 10,000 feet in elevation, and a transition very rapidly to prairie landscapes. For traditional Blackfeet people, that meant that our food systems were incredibly diverse. We had access to all of these mountain plants and mountain animals, as well as prairie plants and prairie animals like bison and antelope. And so when I think about our food systems and revitalizing those traditional food systems, I am lucky that within just a few miles or kilometers from my home, I am able to access a wide variety of foods. And many of these foods are traditional in that they have been eaten by Blackfeet people for thousands of years. And so I am really fortunate to have access to those things. It's interesting because this last summer, there were foods around my own house that I was seeing pop up, come into season, for lack of a better word. And you can see these foods. Some of them, for example, glacier lilies, are these wonderful little edible yellow flowers that are delicious and sweet. And they are some of the first flowers that will bloom after the snow melts. So right when the snow melts, these beautiful yellow flowers will come out and you can snack on them. Or you can use them in a salad, or you can mix them into any number of things. But it was interesting because I feel like I missed the season. As they were coming into bloom around here, around my house, which is lower in elevation, I was caught up in projects and I didn't get to harvest them like I wanted to. And so I was feeling really sad about that. And the same thing happened with different plants. So there would be berries that would ripen here, and my partner and I were caught up in a deck building project, and we didn't get a chance to go out and harvest. And so I was feeling kind of sad about this. But later in August, this past summer, we went up and we were going up into the mountains, and we have a little car. And we were trying to get up into the mountains with this little car, and the roads were washed out at a certain point, so we couldn't get any farther. So we parked the car and we decided to take a hike. And so as we're hiking up in the mountains, we realized that even in August, some of the snow was just melting at these higher elevations. And so these plants that I had seen come into bloom in May and in June and July were just now starting up in the mountains. And it was interesting because not only did we get to snack on all of the delicious flowers and to eat berries that had already ripened and fallen off and been eaten by birds back at our house, we realized this incredible gift that this ecosystem provides in the different times of the year. The seasons that we have access to are extended by virtue of these different elevations in this landscape, and this ability to find places where these foods come into being. And for commercial purposes, for massive agriculture, this isn't a gift that we have access to. The things are planted at the same time and they all get harvested at the same time. And that season of freshness is not, it doesn't take place in the same way. And you don't have that connection to the landscape. You don't get to go chase the plants wherever they're coming into season. And so it's through this, it's through picking these berries and harvesting these different plants that I feel really connected with the landscape, but also because I know that my ancestors, Blackfeet people, have walked these same paths and they found these same ancestors of the berry bushes that I am picking from today. And that makes me feel connected and makes me feel like the land is giving me food to live. And that in itself is a wonderful gift.
Thank you so much, Mariah. And while you were speaking, I was, just visualizing you being in a car and driving up the mountain, and then all of a sudden you can't drive anymore because the road isn't paved. So you have to get out and start walking. And I just the first thing that came to my mind is that although COVID-19 hit hard, and if there's any silver lining, is the fact that it forced us one way or another to with the fact that we're spending maybe more time at home, or maybe because we wanted to make ourselves busy with more projects that we just wanted to be involved in. It made us reflect more on what was really discovered. It wasn't new for our ancestors, but it is for us. Just having to, as I said a couple of minutes ago, to detach from what we consider or what we take for granted, and just go out, and we're going to see that there's a whole different world, or a completely intact world of just nature telling us, here you go, I can give you food, and just show a little bit of respect, and I'll take care of you. And I think this is something that we need to just keep in mind. And I just want to ask you about your Indige Kitchen project, because I am following you for quite some time, as I mentioned. And tell me a little bit more about how you think utilizing those indigenous, I want to say, I don't want to say just simply recipes, because you can use also indigenous fruits and vegetables and items that you can find everywhere. How do you think that could be used today, that could maybe change our lives for the better, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I think that there's so much, so many things that were taken from Indigenous people with regards to our food systems. There was really intentional efforts to control Indigenous food systems with the intention of controlling Indigenous people. And that manifested in different ways throughout the world. And I think most people are interested in connecting more with local foods, with fresh foods. And so I think the more that we as a society, both of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, work to connect with those local food systems, work to connect with the foods that grow all around us or can grow all around us, the more we develop this food sovereignty, this ability to feed ourselves. And as sovereign nations, that ability to feed ourselves is so important for our ability to govern ourselves, to regulate the policies that control our food and agriculture systems, to push back against colonialism and so many of these other things. And by teaching information, by teaching recipes and how to use Indigenous foods, we really enable this connection, but we strengthen people's vested interest in caring for their landscapes. And it's a wonderful vehicle to do all of that with, because we get to do it through delicious food.
Right.
And that will, you can say, pushing back against colonialism is full of confrontation at times.
Right.
There is a way to sneak under the radar using food as this tool. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool, and everyone needs to eat. And so connecting with these foods that are not only healthy for our bodies, but healthy for our landscapes, healthy for these ecosystems that we're trying to take care of,
Right.
we can strengthen all of that.
Right. And I remember you were mentioning once, I'm not sure what's it called, but I think you were preparing fish patties, if you remember. And I think it was a recipe that contained something that is similar to rice, but it isn't rice. And you were explaining how that product is harvested by locals, or by, that was something that was passed on, and the nutritional value of it is very high, and a small portion of it can make a huge meal. And you were explaining to me how people would go on boats in order to collect them. Am I somewhere near the?
Yes, you're talking about wild rice, which is technically a grass and not a true rice, not related to the rices that originate in Asia. But yes, wild rice is still hand harvested by Indigenous people around the Great Lakes region. of the United States and Canada, and the Indigenous nations that are still there. And it's harvested by canoe. And so that process of gathering the wild rice and harvesting those seeds involves shaking the rice into the bottoms of the canoe. But of course, in that process, inevitably some seeds will fall off to the sides of the canoe, but that helps the rice reseed itself. And people and wild rice have co-evolved in those landscapes. And the process of harvesting, while it helps people feed themselves, it also helps ensure the proliferation of that species for the future.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to hear the story again, because when I heard you talk about it for the first time, I personally thought it was amazing. And the fact that I didn't know about it made me realize that a lot of other people didn't know about it. And this is something that a lot of people should know about it. And this is just one thing. I can only imagine how many other things Indigenous people know and use and utilize on a daily basis that could help others around the world, not just necessarily using that particular product or item or vegetable or fruit, but it's the state of mind or the way of thinking and approaching food systems as a whole in a different way. So I truly appreciate you taking the time, Mariah, and sharing that story again. I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and move forward. I would like to introduce Chef Sean Sherman. Chef Sean Sherman, he's been cooking across the US and the world for at least 30 years. His main culinary focus has been the revitalization and awareness of Indigenous food systems in a modern culinary context. Sean has studied on his own extensively to determine the foundations of these food systems. And with us, he will be sharing a portion of his journey, his experience, his knowledge, and his thoughts on the importance of Indigenous food systems. Without any further ado, Chef Sean, the mic is yours.
Okay. Hihani Amashte, thank you so much for having me and listening this morning. My name is Sean Sherman. I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota right now, where it's also a good -20 this morning here. It's pretty cold outside. And I guess I'm just going to explain to you guys a little bit about the work that we're doing and kind of how we got there a little bit. So I grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, and I'm enrolled with the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. And all my family is born and raised on the reservation. My parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents era were the first ones to be moved on to the reservation. So our study is with really just looking at Indigenous food systems and just how we should be thinking about modern day Indigenous food systems and how we could be going towards more decolonized diets and really practicing a lot of that culinary in the kitchens and applying a lot of that philosophy in real time today. So I have a company called The Sioux Chef that I started in 2014. Which was really focused on really looking at the foods around where I happen to be right now, which is in Minnesota at the moment. So we started some food businesses. We had a food truck called Tatanka Truck. We had a catering company, and we really focused on trying to create modern Indigenous recipes based on the foods that were right where we are. So we looked at a history of the agriculture of this region. We looked at a history of the ethnobotanical knowledge and all the wild plants around us. And really tried to create recipes that tasted exactly like we were. And we've been able to create a nonprofit, which we started a few years ago, called NATIVS, which is an acronym for North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. And under NATIVS, we have our nonprofit kitchen called Indigenous Food Lab, which we just opened up this summer here in Minneapolis. And we've been doing the same situation of creating decolonized recipes. And we've been a lot of food support this year because of the pandemic, and also where we are in Minneapolis, we're just a few blocks from where George Floyd was murdered, which created a large social uprising here in Minneapolis and around the world, really. So we started off the summer making 400 meals, healthy Indigenous meals a day. And right now we are in the process of working with 9 out of 11 Minnesota tribes, and we're supplying 10,000 Indigenous meals every week at the moment with a very small team of largely Indigenous chefs And we're really excited for the possibility of the work that we have going on. A lot of this work came from very personal experiences of just growing up on a reservation and having very little access to healthy or nutritional or culturally appropriate foods at all. I, grew up like a lot of kids off the reservation, rather poor. So I started working in restaurants as soon as I could get a job when I was 13 years old in South Dakota. And I worked restaurants all through high school and college, and eventually moved to Minneapolis and worked my way up into a chef position pretty quickly. So I was a really young chef. I was 26, I believe, when I got my first chef job. And just started from there. So really the work that I'm doing now was from an epiphany of, after having quite a few years of chef experience, I all of a sudden realized that I knew very little about my own ancestral heritage when it came to culinary. Looking around, realized a lot of information out there on Indigenous foodways anywhere, and really started trying to understand what my direct ancestors were eating, how they were harvesting foods, who they were trading with, how they were gathering plants, and just basically everything I was trying to look through with a culinary perspective to understand. I realized that I could name hundreds of European recipes off the top of my head as a chef and knew very little Lakota recipes. So this work really took me on a journey to try and understand this information, and also the realization of how much damage was done to our Indigenous knowledge base, and realizing the short time period of that, because I was born in 1974 on Pine Ridge in South Dakota, and 100 years before my birth in 1874, all my Lakota ancestors still retained 100% of their Indigenous knowledge and foodways, because they didn't discover gold until 1876 in the Black Hills, and things go downhill really fast. So a lot of this journey was to understand, what did my ancestors lose when it came to knowledge. And I look at the different eras of how the United States government treated Indigenous peoples. So I see the 1800s as an entire century of destruction and genocide happening, and Indigenous peoples being forcibly removed. And then the 1900s, our education systems are replaced with colonial structures and boarding schools. And so that's my grandparents' generation, who had to learn English, learn Christianity, cut their hair, and really kind of move away from this Indigenous knowledge base. And my parents' generation are right in the middle of that. So by the time I was born, there was so much missing. And I think there's so much that we need to, as global Indigenous peoples, really truly understand the importance of retaining and reclaiming a lot of our ancestral Indigenous knowledge base, and preserving it for the future generations. So I see us as just trying to be stewards of this knowledge base, and realizing that it's not just a situation here in the US, but colonialism has affected people all across the globe, all of the Americas, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and we all need to band together to preserve our Indigenous foodways. Because if you look at the commonalities of Indigenous peoples and how we have survived for thousands of generations and millennia, it's really understanding that we as Indigenous peoples, our education systems were really based on where we were, and it's a system of understanding that we could live sustainably utilizing plants and animal and cultural knowledge, no matter where we are. So it's that understanding of Native American agriculture, seed saving, soil management, wild foods and ethnobotany and plant identification, sustainable harvesting, medicinals, language, histories, arts and culture, all of it ties together. So it's a very broad education base, and we just really want to do everything we can. So the work that we're doing right now with Indigenous Food Lab, even though we're doing this massive amount of food relief and support, our real goal is working directly with Indigenous communities, helping them to develop their own Indigenous food programming for their community, so they can start to create healthy Indigenous foods that's culturally and regionally appropriate to themselves where they are. And we just hope to be a training, development, and support center to be able to do this over and over again. And we eventually hope to open up Indigenous food labs in cities all over the US, and eventually cross over the colonial borders, and we can be in Mexico, we can be in Canada, we can be in South America, and we can be basically everywhere in the future. But we're going to need a lot of partners out there, and I feel like now is really the time, because we are in danger as a global community and global Indigenous community of continuously losing so much knowledge as more and more elders pass away. And you know, a lot of our food and education systems are continuously held up by colonial structures, and there's just a lot of work to do out there. So I just encourage everybody to really think about the land that they're standing on, the history of the land, and how are people surviving for millennia before European influence, where that's applicable, and just how we can live a better, healthier lifestyle if we can create, in the model of Indigenous communities, more localized regional food systems, again, that are holding on to cultural beliefs and identities, and really showcasing the importance of celebrating diversity instead of homogenizing, because we are a beautiful global community and we should be embracing our diversity.
Thank you so much, Chef Sean. You know, you've mentioned a lot of things, and you took us on a journey with your story, and I truly appreciate that. One thing that really caught my attention is the fact that, you know, you managed to feed on a regular basis about 10,000 people using indigenous ingredients and to promote the indigenous food knowledge. This is fascinating. This, if anything, goes to show that utilizing indigenous ingredients and indigenous knowledge in an effective way can help people prosper, can help people survive, and it can help people through that are going through difficulties. And it's such a, I don't want to say it's a shame, but it's sad to see that we had to go through a pandemic for people to realize the importance of indigenous people's food systems. So, but at least I'm happy that we are able to shed light on that and able to see how important those food systems are. Thank you so much, Chef Sean. I do have a question. I'll circle back to Chef Sean, but I have a question for Chef Mariah. Excuse me, for Chef Bella first, and then I'll come back to Chef Mariah because I have a question for her as well. Chef Bella and maybe Chef Dane and Dr. Sonia, what would you say? You mentioned the food ingredient specifically for Dr. Sonia and Chef Dane, the fruit bread that came from Africa. Specifically, and it became a part of your culture. How would you say that those food systems integrated within your culture as a whole, the Afro-descendant food systems, or if any at all? Do you think that influenced your culture since it started?
Let me go first because of my instability here. All of the speakers have eloquently demonstrated the value of traditional knowledge to our survival. There is no need really for discussion to support that, but everything that we do, all of our culture can be traced back to the habits of our people from Africa. If I speak in the domain of using plants for medicine, I am in the process of writing a paper to demonstrate that dependence on plant biodiversity that was shown by the enslaved as they worked to keep themselves in a healthy state just to survive the harsh conditions under which they were being managed. And that knowledge did not appear from, you know, what the colonial masters were telling you. They came over with that knowledge. And I've been able to trace families of plants that were used by the enslaved that are still showing up along West Africa in terms of the tradition. So it's impossible to separate us from our environment and our knowledge that allows us to survive in that environment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonia. Chef Dane, you'd like
All
to
right.
add anything?
Yes, what Sonia is saying is true. Our culture at present is based on our ancestry, and it's even seen in our foods. It's just in the last, I would say, 20 years with the introduction of Western cuisine and fast food that we've strayed from our traditional culinary practices, and that has led in the increase in NCDs, hypertension, really bad eating and bad practices, which has caused our people to suffer. But if we stayed on the path of our ancestors in terms of traditional cuisine, we would have a healthier society. and a more sustainable society.
Thank you so much, Chef Dane. Chef Bella.
Okay, so I can't agree more with Dr. Sonia. I'd like to add that here in Brazil, this culture of the plants medicines, they survived with the religions of African ascendants. So that's a good thing. But I agree that we should know more about it and use more of it. But here in Brazil, these plants are still alive in people's routine and people's lives through the religion, especially candomblé.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chef Bella. And I have a question for Chef Mariah and Chef Sean. If you were to choose one ingredient, one indigenous ingredient forever, what would that ingredient be? So a top ingredient that you can choose and simply rely on for the rest of your life. What would that be? That being for its nutritional value, for its availability, maybe for anything that you think makes it more special than others. What would you say your top pick would be?
Is someone trying to eliminate indigenous foods? Because
What?
I would hope that we're past that point.
No, 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 no. I'm saying, what's your favorite? Let me rephrase that.
All right. Lots of favorites for lots of reasons. But I'm just gonna pick all squash because squash are amazing. And that's kind of a cop-out, I realize, because there are hundreds of varieties of squash. But there are things like zucchini, which we can use from everything for zucchini noodles to little zucchini fries to just making up delicious like fried zucchini in a pan real fast and zucchini bread, to winter squashes like pumpkins or butternut squash or like acorn squash, different squashes like that, which of course can stay contained and can stay edible and fresh into the winter months because of that their little hard shell that makes them self-preserving in that way. But they can also be eaten as delicious sweet desserts, right? Like pumpkin pies or roasted with a little bit of maple syrup on them, or cooked up and mixed with meats or other things. And when they're eaten with beans and corn, of course, they form a complete protein. So it's part of a well-balanced diet, but I'm not going to choose between indigenous foods.
No, I understand, and thank you so much for that. I didn't know that. Now, when you mentioned squash, obviously maybe others would maybe know. I didn't know that it's a family of vegetables. So I didn't know that zucchini and pumpkins and they're all from the same family. That's fantastic. That's a very good pick, which you don't have to choose because you don't have to. Thank you so much, Chef Sean. What would you say?
Yeah, that's obviously a super hard question because we live in this world with so much amazing diversity, and it's really hard to choose just one thing, you know. So I would go to possibly chokecherry, which is something really special to me from my youth and grows in a large area of North America. But really, if I had to pick one indigenous food of the Americas, I would probably have to pick chili peppers because I need spicy in my food.
Yes, I can't agree with you more. I had an attempt to grow peppers on my side alone, but I failed. I don't know what am I doing wrong. Although I had a friend who's doing a great job. I love the fact how actually his grandparents used to grow peppers here in Eastern Europe, and he was showing me how he would manually go to each plant and then he would take from the center of every plant some I don't know, some pollens, and then he would go and manually put it in somewhere else, and then he would wait, and then it would to grow to wonderful colors of the peppers. And for me, it's like seeing, I mean, for the lack of a better comparison, I think it's like giving birth. When you know, to see a plant give birth to something very beautiful, and then you can enjoy it, that's fantastic. So thank you so much for that, Chef Sean. I think in conclusion, I would like just to I took some notes over here, and I think that we live in a world where mostly, as I said, we take food for granted. We take we take our knowledge for granted, and hopefully in the light of the stories shared today and in recent events around the world, I think we can all agree that food as a term is much more than a trip down the grocery store. Food is much more complicated than that. It's knowledge, it's history, it's art, it's health, it's life. Especially indigenous food systems are important, and investing in that knowledge is an investment in resilience, it's an investment in prosperity, it's an investment in survival. And I think on that note, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. And until we see each other again, I would like to say stay safe, eat delicious food, and try some indigenous recipes. They are wonderful. I tried some myself and they changed my life. So thank you again, everyone, and see you in the next one. Bye.